Okay, members, ready to resume the sitting? It's time now for questions to the Executive Office. Before we commence, I wish to advise members that I have received correspondence from the Deputy First Minister to say that she is unable to attend today. Junior Minister Kearney is here on her behalf. And I call Órlaithí Flynn to ask the first question. Órlaithí Flynn.
Question number 1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There has been significant progress in delivering the Together Building a United Community strategy, with a number of the headline actions fully achieved. Over 24,000 young people have taken part in TBUC camps, and 5 urban villages areas have been established. 4 shared education campuses have been approved and are progressing. 10 shared neighbourhoods providing 483 new homes have been completed. Over 6,000 young people have participated in the Peace for Youth programme, and over 26,000 young people have engaged with the Uniting Communities through Sport and Creativity programme. The number of interface barriers has been reduced by 14. We remain fully committed to the TBUC strategy, demonstrated by the provision of £12 million of executive funding in the 2021-22 year.
Supplementary, Órlaithí Flynn.
Yes, thank you, and I thank the Minister for his response. He'll also be aware that there has been some distress in reports over the summer of sectarian attacks and intimidation. There has been still the issue of the burning of flags and other emblems on bonfires, and I would like to ask the Minister, what does he believe the Executive, what additional steps can the Executive take to tackle sectarianism in all of its forms and manifestations? Thank you.
Well, over the summer there were incidences that happened that are to be condemned and shouldn't have happened. I believe that people should be able to celebrate their culture in a way that doesn't require denigrating somebody else's culture, and ultimately that's what we want to achieve. This TBUC approach that we take with young people allows people to come together from different traditions, and I had the opportunity during the summer when I was in Limavady with the Row residents group there, and heard firsthand of the experiences of young people, some who had never actually mixed, and that's maybe hard to believe in this day and age, but still hadn't mixed outside of their own community. And they were able to get a better understanding of and appreciation of other people's culture and gain better respect from that. So ultimately, that's the kind of society that we want, one that respects difference and one that celebrates difference.
Thank you. And just remind members that questions 14 and 15 have been withdrawn. I call Jim Allister.
This strategy, as I recall, has been with us for about 6 years, maybe even more. And in that time, the expenditure on it has been, I think, something over £100 million. Can the First Minister truly say that there has been commensurate success of that value in this time? And when we look at building a united community strategy, what is the message of the failure, no surprise to me, but of the failure to build a united executive? Is that not jar with the protestations of success in this project?
Well, I think when we look at the areas in which this scheme transcends, it includes housing, it covers education, it encourages bringing people together. It's not just facilitating those conversations. It requires tangible changes to take place. We look at the 5 different urban villages that are going to be rejuvenated. I look at the different areas that that's going to have an impact. So it's transformative, both in terms of physical infrastructure, but it also has had an impact upon people's attitudes where that aspect of the programme has been engaged. And when it comes to the executive, all I would say is that, yes, there are some issues that create tension. But this executive has been able to make significant progress on a whole range of areas. I appreciate that there are some that get exemplified when it comes to where there is difference, but there are many examples where the executive has been able to have a united approach, where we have been able to make real, tangible changes to people's lives which are beneficial to everybody in this community.
And I call John Stewart.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From March 2021 to date, the Executive has continued to consider proposals for the relaxation of restrictions as outlined in Moving Forward, the Executive's pathway out of restrictions. The Executive have undertaken multiple reviews of the restrictions, taking decisions on appropriate relaxations as early as conditions would allow, in line with the most up-to-date scientific and medical advice. Recently, further relaxations have been affected by an increase in the Delta variant, which has slowed the rate at which the Executive has been able to ease restrictions. However, the Executive is committed to retaining restrictions only as long as is absolutely necessary. The most recently agreed to further easing of restrictions came in on Friday the 10th of September, and that covered indoor domestic settings, hospitality, music and dancing.
Supplementary, John Stewart.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank the First Minister for his answer so far. Does the First Minister agree that, given the recent disappointing figures around infections and the difficulty in getting some people vaccinated, that it is more important now than ever to have a joined-up approach and a joined-up message? And does he agree also with me that stability of government here is integral to that as well, to ensure that these institutions survive given the pandemic and the impacts of that? Would he agree that that joint message cannot be damaged by solo runs?
Well, I think it is important that when it comes to communicating the messages that we do that effectively, and there's been a range of platforms where we've been able to get the message out as to what they are. I understand that as we are easing restrictions, sometimes the public aren't always aware as to what the current rules are in respect of that. And the Executive has considered all of the restrictions that have been made over the past number of months, interrogated the evidence, and ultimately the Executive has reached a position on that. So I think we keep making the progress that I would like to see us make, but very much cognizant of the fact that there is still a prevalence of the transmission out there in the community. There is pressures on our health service. And everybody needs to take that personal responsibility to take the right decisions. As we move away, which we have been doing now, from regulations into guidance, that requires people to take personal responsibility. They need to be informed as to the type of decisions that can help them take that in the interests of protecting not just themselves, but also other people.
Colin McGrath.
Could the First Minister explain to the House how this roadmap can be effectively delivered, given the reckless remarks from his party leader about bringing down these institutions? And what message do you have for the businesses, for the communities and for the people out there if the message from your party leader is that this place can be brought down and decisions won't be able to be taken?
Well, our party is very clear. We want this Executive to continue to work. We want this Assembly to continue to operate and to take the type of decisions that we are taking. But the basis on which we restored these institutions, it's a new decade, new approach, and it was commitments made by the United Kingdom Government that Northern Ireland would be unfettered access on an east-west dimension, and that the internal market of the United Kingdom would be restored. And so the fundamentals on which the Executive is formed has to be right, and that's why there's a window of opportunity now for both the United Kingdom Government and the European Union to make sure that the changes that need to be made are made. We will continue to operate these institutions in good faith when it comes to carrying through decisions on whether it's health, education, housing, all of the areas that affect people's lives, but we have to make sure that the fundamental building blocks on which this Executive and this Assembly are based are sound, and that requires action to be taken over the short window of opportunity that now exists.
Ciara Ferguson.
Will the Minister confirm that the public health advice will be core to directing and guiding the Executive's future response to the management of this pandemic?
And can I welcome the member to her place and wish her well in her new role. The Executive considers a number of areas when it comes to taking the decisions. It's informed by health advice, but it's also informed by the economic impact that restrictions can continue to have, the impact upon the wider community, society and family, and that's where we've seen changes around domestic indoor settings, a recognition of the need for greater contact within families. So there are a number of factors that the Executive has to consider. Of course, health will continue to have a significant role in that, but we take that in the context of other areas that have to be considered by the Executive as well.
George Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, could I ask the First Minister to detail what progress has been made over the summer period in relaxing restrictions to return to a degree of normality in relation to the horrific pandemic that we are all experiencing?
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. Over the course of the summer, the Executive continued to meet regularly. There have been 38 individual areas where restrictions have been made during that period of time. We now have 9 areas which currently are dealt with by way of regulation that is left, and I think that's been part of this Executive's approach, changing of restrictions, evaluating the impact, and then allowing further decisions to be taken. Other jurisdictions held restrictions in place in a whole comprehensive range of areas and then opened them all up, and that has led to significant spikes whenever that has happened. This Executive approach has been one of a cautious approach of reopening, because what nobody wants is to have restrictions brought back in, and we're at a place now where we have reduced the number of areas that restrictions exist in law to a small number, and the Executive will be meeting again on the 23rd of this month, where we will be able to take further decisions in respect of those areas that remain.
Moving on, I call Sinéad Bradley.
Question 3.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Consolidated Recovery Plan was published on the 2nd of August. The Consolidated Recovery Plan aims to deliver societal, economic and health recovery. It provides opportunities for collaborative action intended to accelerate recovery over the next 24 months, ensure that the citizen is better off in the short term, and address critical challenges that our citizens are facing today and in the near term. Significant work has been undertaken with all departments to determine the funding position of the 83 interventions, and that work is continuing. At this stage, the funding position of 70 of the 83 interventions has been confirmed, with 60 fully funded and 10 partially funded. Work is ongoing to finalise the funding position for the remaining 13 interventions. The Executive's budget 21-22 allocated £1.148 billion for COVID support and recovery. The allocation of a further £316 million was agreed on the 20th of May. However, funding for these allocations is for a one-year period only, with no guarantee of additional COVID money from the UK Treasury for 2021-22. Funding for the 22-23 year and beyond will not be known until the UK spending review announcement later this year. The recovery plan has been designed to progress interventions over a 2-year period in order to focus attention on immediate priority actions and longer-term interventions that require planning and commencement now.
Sinéad Bradley, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to welcome the First Minister to his first question time and thank him for the answer so far. In terms of the priorities, is there an inbuilt system where you can monitor the growth and the anticipated outcomes to revise and see who at any point in time may need additional support? And is there a system where each minister can feed into the Executive to make a bid for that support as and when they need it?
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank the member for her remarks and welcoming me to my First Minister question time. The very central tenet of this document is the collaborative nature of it in terms of the departments working together on it. Vitally important then that there are adequate oversights so that if issues arise, as the member has outlined, that can be identified, and if additional resource, whether financial or support from other departments is required, that can be done. So work is ongoing to develop the appropriate oversight and reporting arrangements, and that will tell us how effective the interventions are in accelerating recovery. It will be a cross-departmental approach to ensuring all aspects of recovery are considered, and there will be regular updates provided to the Executive, the first before the end of this calendar year.
I call Diane Dodds.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I thank the First Minister for his answers thus far. The COVID recovery plan actually encompasses many areas of society, as it should, the economy, society, health and so on. But many elements of the money that was dedicated to the Economic Recovery Action Package, 300 million, were simply for one-year interventions with no further funding. Will the Minister ensure And will the Executive Office ensure that there is continued funding for intervention in the economy, particularly around building skills to take the economy forward and providing the prosperity that is so crucial to peace in Northern Ireland?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the member for her question. I know economy is something close to her heart after the excellent work she carried out in that role. She'll be pleased to know within this document there are 37 interventions that focus on building that sustainable economic development. And we are committed to working together around economic recovery, and we're preparing to send, as the Minister will know, because she pioneered this, the voucher scheme, which will help stimulate economic activity on our high streets and protect jobs. And on the issue around education, that is part of the action interventions around making sure we have a skills-based approach to that when it comes to our training colleges, when we look at the need for more apprenticeships, all to help our younger people to make sure they have the appropriate skills to take up the job opportunities that arise. So as we emerge from this period of COVID, it is vital that we really seek to address the need for that economic development and ensure that we have the right skills to build upon that.
Thank you. And moving on, I call Áine Murphy.
Question 4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everyone here will have been moved and indeed distressed by the harrowing scenes from Afghanistan. Just as for the Syrian refugees, we want Northern Ireland to play its part in responding to this humanitarian crisis, and the Executive united in a commitment to do so at its meeting on the 6th of September. We have now written to the Prime Minister formally committing to resettle citizens under the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy and the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme. Officials via the Strategic Planning Group are working to determine final numbers to be resettled and make preparations to support arrivals as soon as possible.
Thank you. And a supplementary for Áine Murphy.
Can the First Minister outline the steps of the resettlement process and the support available to Afghan refugees?
Well, the programme that we're going to be following has been largely built upon through the Syrian Refugee Resettlement Scheme. The Department for Communities led on that. Indeed, at the time I was the Communities Minister whenever the first Syrian families came to Northern Ireland, and there were then 25 subsequent occasions whenever families came and sought refuge here in Northern Ireland. So there is a lot of good work that exists. The Department for Communities lead on that, but obviously there is support in terms of health when it comes to housing. There is collaboration that takes place from other departments, but the Department for Communities will be primarily responsible for the schemes.
I call Stuart Dixon.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your reply so far. Minister, would you agree with me and condemn the actions of a small minority of people who protested in Carrickfergus recently at the presence of refugees there? And will you make it very clear to this House and to everybody who's listening today that Northern Ireland is open and a welcoming place for refugees, and that there is no place for those people who wish to protest against those who have come from very difficult backgrounds to get to Northern Ireland?
Raises an important point, and one that the Executive has had to consider, because there are increasing people arriving here seeking asylum. And there are a range of different measures where assistance is provided, and there are a number of schemes that now exist. There was the Syrian refugee scheme, there's now going to be the Afghanistan scheme, there is a Hong Kong scheme, and there are quite a number. And in the correspondence that was sent from the Deputy First Minister and I, we've highlighted that to the Prime Minister, that it's important that there is equality of treatment when it comes to people that require help and assistance as well, and that there is the potential for differentials when it comes to providing support. So we recognise the unique circumstances where people seek refuge here, but Northern Ireland has always been a welcoming place, and when people come here seeking help, they do so having left very tragic circumstances and in distress, and it's only right that we provide them with the appropriate support. And obviously when it comes to immigration policy, that's a matter that isn't devolved to here. It's a matter for the Home Office ultimately to determine if people's request for asylum ultimately leads to them staying here. But when they're here, it's important that there is support provided.
Call Mark Duggan.
I can thank the First Minister for his answers and welcome his condemnation of those who protest against the resettlement of refugees here. In earlier answers, the Minister has referred to the Syrian refugee resettlement scheme. Could the Minister outline any specific lessons that were learned for that scheme that can be applied to this one that will ensure its smooth operation and support getting to those who need it most?
Well, whenever those experiences were learned, the families settling into a community, then when it came to education, indeed getting access to a local GP, the learning was garnered from that in terms of how do you get a better and smoother process, but also then linking up people so that they were able to have contact with people from their own country as well as then integrating with their own local community. So there has been learning from all of that, and that will then shape the way in which the process rolls out for welcoming people from Afghanistan.
Next question, I call Andy Allen.
Question 5, Mr. Speaker.
I and the Deputy First Minister, acting jointly, have not engaged directly with the UK Government on this matter. There has been engagement between officials in respect of the technical details of the bill.
Supplementary, Andy Allen.
And I thank the First Minister for his answer. First Minister, can you advise how the Executive Office will ensure that the Armed Forces Bill, when finalised, when it's completed its passage through the House, will be implemented here in Northern Ireland equally so as it will be across the United Kingdom? And also why to date the Executive Office has not made a formal appointment to the Armed Forces Covenant Reference Group, which sets the strategic direction for Covenant funding across the UK?
Well, I thank the member for that, and this is a very important issue. We have some 150,000 veterans here in Northern Ireland. When it comes to the military covenant, this was a commitment in terms of the New Decade, New Approach. That legislation is going through Westminster. That will become law. That places the duties then on departments to make sure that the law is covered and people are getting then the services as a consequence of having that additional legal protection in place. We have had as well the appointment made of the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, Mr Kinahan, someone who will be familiar to Mr Allen's party, and I know that he is engaged in representing the needs and concerns of veterans. I will come back to the member with a specific answer in terms of the particular body that he mentioned, but it is vital that as this bill becomes law and it completes its legislative passage through Westminster, that then the services are provided and there will be a legal responsibility on all the departments to do that.
And I call Harry Harvey.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. That'll be question 6, please, First Minister.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, if I could ask Junior Minister Middleton to answer this question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the 3rd of March 2021, the UK Government published documentation and application processes for the Levelling Up Fund, with the call for applications closing on the 18th of June. The UK Levelling Up Fund is managed and directed by the UK Government, which has not engaged with the High Street Task Force or asked for its views to date. Northern Ireland departments have no role in the promotion or assessment of the Levelling Up Fund, nor have we any control over the objectives or criteria that applications will be assessed against. To date, the High Street Task Force has not engaged with councils in relation to the Levelling Up Fund, but it will be speaking to councils in the near future and others as it develops its recommendations on shaping the interventions and investments over the coming months.
Supplementary, Harry Harvey.
Thank the Junior Minister very much for his answer. Could the Minister please outline what progress has been made through the High Street Task Force to date? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for his supplementary? Restoring the vibrancy of our high streets will take a number of phases over a period of years. Of course, as we emerge from the lockdown, the immediate priority has been opening high streets and rolling out a COVID recovery strategy. That has been the focus of the Executive COVID Task Force, which is headed by the Head of the Civil Service. The High Street Task Force, whose latest meeting I chaired just last week, has a longer-term focus of addressing the fundamental need for the transformation of our high streets in response to a fundamental societal and economic change. It is working to bring forward recommendations on priority work areas and on potential funding opportunities. So this is very much a long-term project. Transformation won't happen overnight, and significant work has already gone into getting us to this point. Already, significant work has been carried out by the Executive Office and the Department for Communities in relation to the setting up of the High Street Task Force. 4 bespoke subgroups reflecting the 4 functions or work streams of the Task Force have been set up, with the membership being broad and as inclusive as possible. A dedicated staffing resource has been put in place, allowing the Secretariat support to manage the High Street Task Force to ensure overall governance, setting direction, commissioning work and formal approval or sign-off of products. The task force has been actively engaged in establishing 4 subgroups which have met on a number of occasions, drawing up relevant themes that are affecting town, city and village centres right across Northern Ireland. A programme of comprehensive engagement and co-design with stakeholders, including councils, will commence very shortly, and the High Street Task Force is aiming to have its report and its recommendations completed by March 2022.
Thank you, Minister. And I call Sinead McLaughlin.
Thank you for your answers so far. Does the Junior Minister agree with me that at this moment in time, the High Street Task Force is really lacking a strategic direction and support? It's now in danger of actually really losing steam and momentum, and I'm really concerned because this is at the moment and this is the time that High Street Task Force needs to be leading the way in order that we can build back recovery and build it back stronger than before.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the member for her question? The High Street Task Force, which just recently, as I said, I chaired last week, it has been focused over this past number of months on trying to get the mechanisms in place, hearing from the members of the subgroups, and they brought forward all of that information last week to the plenary meeting. I'm hoping that there will be, along with Junior Minister Kearney, another meeting within the next 6 weeks. There has been momentum building. There's a lot of expectation around the High Street Task Force, and we're trying to manage that. But I am mindful that we have put in place support through the Secretariat to try and move that along. But what I would say, I want to pay tribute to all of the members of the High Street Task Force. A huge amount of effort has been put in. Their expertise is very much valued. And I look forward now to the next number of weeks where we can bring forward all of those proposals and we can go out to the people within our communities to hear their views and hopefully bring something forward which can be used by all ministers to try and make our high streets and town centres a better place for all of us to live in.
Thank you, and I call Andrew Muir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating impact upon our town centres. I think particularly of Bangor Town Centre, and a number of retailers have now closed or have left the town centre. Will the Junior Minister confirm to me that it is really important that these recommendations come forward at speed and that there are concrete, specific recommendations and initiatives to help our town centres across Northern Ireland?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the member for his question? I absolutely do agree. I think the focus of myself and Junior Minister Kearney has been trying to keep that momentum, but also give the space to the members, the expertise within the group, to allow them to share their views, but also to ensure that when we go out for that engagement with people in your constituency and businesses and the Chamber of Commerce's, that what's brought back is effective, that it can be implemented, but also that if the timelines allow and we can complete this piece of work by March 2022, that when ministers take up office, that there's a piece of work there that can be lifted and used and can be of use, obviously, going forward for our town and city centres.
And I call Cathal Boylan, and you will not have time for supplementary.
Chester Shock, led hold question number 7, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. By the end of August 2021, the Historical Institutional Abuse Redress Board had received 1,844 applications and considered 1,374 for determination. the Board has made determinations totalling just over £25 million, and approximately £21.5 million has been paid to victims and survivors. Executive Office officials are currently meeting victims and survivors groups to discuss the content of a terms of reference for the review of the historical institutional abuse redress process, with a view to putting these to ministers in October. Once the terms of reference have been finalised, they will be presented to the Executive Office Committee.
Thank you. And that ends the period for a list of questions, and we now move to 15 minutes of topical questions. Question 7 has been withdrawn, and can we now bring Declan McAleer to ask the first question on screen, please?
Will the First Minister commit to ensure that the voices of those professional and support bodies that work with women will be involved in the design and development of the much-needed violence against women and girls strategy?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very important strategy that the Executive Office is taking forward, and it's vital that we have all of those voices being heard, not least women and girls that have particular experience that then can assist in formulating that strategy. So it is something that is being taken forward, and I'll ensure that the members' comments are well brought to the attention of officials so that that can be accommodated.
Supplementary, Declan McAleer.
I thank the First Minister for his response. Would he be in a position to give any indication on when we can expect to see the strategy in place?
Well, there is work ongoing. It is a priority for the Executive, so we are prioritising resources within our own office. It is of a cross-cutting nature as well in terms of other departments that have a role in doing this. So I don't have a date, but all I can say to the member is that it is a priority for the Executive Office to have this strategy brought forward as soon as possible.
And I call Pat Sheehan.
Would the First Minister agree with me that the public has a right to expect the full implementation and delivery of New Decade, New Approach, given it's the basis on which these institutions were re-established?
Mr. Speaker, the member is right in terms of the basis on which all of the parties entered in to reforming these institutions after a prolonged period when these institutions were in a state of suspension. Within that, there is a commitment by the United Kingdom Government that when it comes to the internal market, that Northern Ireland will be an integral part to it. The Northern Ireland Protocol, however, has caused damage economically, damage to our wider society. It has created political tension, and therefore that has to be addressed. Because that was the basis on which my party re-engaged in these institutions as well, so that area has to be respected. Because the member will know that the Belfast Agreement is very clear on where the delicate balance was struck when it comes to unionists, nationalists and indeed others. And whenever one aspect of that is damaged, it causes harm across all others. And so when the East-West relationship has been harmed, which it has been by the Northern Ireland Protocol, that has an impact when it comes to North-South. I want to see these issues resolved. I want to see these institutions working, because I believe that we are best placed to represent the people who elect us in terms of how we run a country, that we can do that better than other jurisdictions. But we have to address the fundamental problems that have now occurred as a result of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and I hope that the UK Government and the European Union sees the window of opportunity that exists, but that window of opportunity is closing.
Pat Sheehan, supplementary.
I thank the First Minister for his answer there, and I don't want to get into to and fro about the protocol and Brexit and who was responsible for all of that, because the member knows it was his own party in alliance with the English nationalists and the ERG and so on who are totally responsible for this. But can the First Minister give an update on the Executive Office's departmental commitments in NDNA?
Well, when it comes to the issue of where did it all go wrong in respect of Brexit. It has been the outworking and implementation of that by the UK government. We were very clear that Northern Ireland should be treated just as the rest of the United Kingdom. Where there is a change for the constitutional arrangements, the Belfast Agreement makes provision for that, and there needs to be the approval of the people. There was no approval of anybody in Northern Ireland for the changes that flowed from the Northern Ireland Protocol. We were not consented. The unionist representatives of this Assembly were not consented. And so it's vital that whenever you are going to make these type of changes, that it is done in a way that has consensus. The Protocol doesn't. So I want to have it resolved. I want to see a solution to this. In our meetings with Mara Sečkovic, that the Junior Minister Kearney attended with me, I made it clear that I want both communities and our whole community to be in the best of both worlds, where you have access to the European single market and you've got access to Great Britain's market in an unfettered manner. We don't have that. We don't have it because of the barriers created from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, to the tune of some £850 million a year, based upon a leading economist, Esmond Burney, and his assessment of it. So that causes harm, not just to unionists politically, but to everybody. Your own constituents who are nationalist and republican aren't able to get the type of goods and services that they should be able to get. So this transcends both unionists and nationalists when it comes to the practical implications. On the other Executive Office commitments that reside as a result of New Decade, New Approach, the Office continues to work in terms of seeking those to be brought forward.
I'm going to call Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First Minister, you've just used a phrase that I find wholly insulting: both communities. Do I not exist in Northern Ireland? Do people I represent not exist here?
Of course you exist, and you make your voice heard loud and clearly. Of course there are both communities within the Belfast Agreement that her party supported, which actually brought about the unionist nationalist and the designation of other. So if the member has a particular problem with how she is designated, its origins are in the 1998 Belfast Agreement, which her party championed.
Supplementary, Kelly Armstrong.
The Good Friday Agreement does recognise the term other, which is of course insulting, but of course it says then that there's more than two communities. So I would ask the First Minister, when he's referencing the community of Northern Ireland, that he recognises there's more than two communities. With regards to that, we are a diverse community. And earlier today, during question time, you were asked about the number of refugees. We have had the disgusting and despicable accusations that these people will be coming to Northern Ireland, taking our jobs and stealing our homes. And that has come not only just from people outside of this place, but other elected representatives in other places in Northern Ireland. Can I ask the Minister what communications that he will put forward to ensure that refugees are known to be welcome here and to be included here, and that anyone who makes allegations about them taking our jobs or taking our homes are to be absolutely taken out of the equation and not to be considered any further?
The member makes the point very well, and I agree with her. If anything, there is huge demand for jobs in Northern Ireland, and there is a shortage of labour supply. So the argument that is put forward by some that they're taking our jobs doesn't stand whenever it is tested against the available job criteria and the number of jobs that need to be filled. So I referred to this earlier in the question time. Whenever people seek asylum and seek refuge in Northern Ireland, they do it because they have came from a position of distress, and it's vital that we give them that support. Whenever that process is being considered by the Home Office and applications then for citizenship, that ultimately isn't a devolved issue, but we do have a responsibility to provide support for people who are here in Northern Ireland and to find ways in which they can be part of our society. It is not without its challenges to making sure that we have an integrated society and where people do feel welcome, and that's where I make it clear that our strength in Northern Ireland is our diversity. It is the fact that we are a multicultural society, and that isn't something that ought to be feared. It's something that should be welcomed, and we should be able to respect people and to respect their differences and to celebrate that and to celebrate those differences.
I call Paula Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
First Minister, for some time now in the Committee for Communities, we have been asking where the welfare reform mitigations are, and we keep getting told that it is stuck at executive level. Can I ask that you, as part of the Executive Office, press for the legislation to extend the welfare mitigations and that be brought forward at the earliest opportunity?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the member has engaged in this issue for a long time, particularly in her role as Chair of the Communities Committee. So, yes, there is support from all the ministers within the Executive Office for the mitigations to be extended. The New Decade, New Approach document referred to, and I quote, extending existing welfare mitigation measures beyond March 2020 when they are currently due to expire. And so, Mr. Speaker, from my party's perspective, we are fully supportive of that, and indeed we have committed to mitigations not just being extended but rolled over for an additional 3 years. The current position, where the mitigations are not clearly provided for in legislation, is far from satisfactory. And in Northern Ireland, we already offer a much more extensive welfare support than other parts of the United Kingdom or indeed Ireland, and we believe that measures should be subject to review at regular stages to ensure that Northern Ireland is offering the most appropriate and effective possible support.
Paul Bradley, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the First Minister for his answer. So I would take from that answer then that we should expect at some stage in our committee to get something back from our executive. And can I also ask that you also press through your office for the closing of the loopholes on the benefits cap and the bedroom tax as well?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the member. And yes, I have formally communicated the position of the party within the Executive Office in respect of the answer that I just gave, and I touched upon this at the executive meeting, and I trust that would allow an appropriate paper to be brought forward now by the Communities Minister. In terms of the issue that the member raises around loopholes, ministers will of course look at closing any loopholes that exist in the current welfare framework that are not entirely new policy proposals beyond what has been previously agreed.
Thank you, Minister. And I call down Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the First Minister provide an update on the funding of the Communities in Transition programme?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank the member for that? On the 16th of February, the Secretary of State wrote to the Justice Minister to confirm that £10 million over 3 years was being made available from NDNA to support delivery of the Communities in Transition project over 3 years. The Northern Ireland Secretary of State further confirmed that Her Majesty's Treasury was to provide £5 million of funding to support the wider programme for the 21-22 year.
Supplementary, Dan Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the First Minister for that update. Substantial funding from this particular funding stream has already gone into parts of Lurgan, particularly North Lurgan. Will the First Minister support the extension of this funding to neighbouring areas within the Lurgan community that have equally been impacted by paramilitarism and difficulties?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I know the member does extensive work in her constituency, not just in North Lurgan but in South Lurgan, in terms of making representation for them, and has done so on this issue. So I recognise that the member and her colleagues are making the case in areas such as South Lurgan. Unfortunately, presently, we have not received as much funding as that we would have liked to allow us to extend the programme to new areas. However, an area of influence has been articulated in our policy as an area which is not contained within the core area of intervention, though may neighbour or be adjacent to, which has a significant impact on the core area of intervention. This policy recognises the paramilitary or criminal organisations do not limit their activity to postcodes or electoral wards. Therefore, we should not limit activity where there is clearly a link, and for this reason that we have been looking at trying to provide a modest sum for areas of influence where there is growing evidence that activity in an area of influence can have a positive impact. And this activity will be aimed at building relationships, raising awareness of the Communities in Transition project and supporting enabling work to build resilience in these areas. Officials are currently considering how these sums could be administered to ensure needs are met, and options may include developing a small grants scheme, for example. Any more significant expansion of project interventions into these communities would require additional funding, but that is something that we would be willing to look at in the future.
I call Mr Doug Beattie, and you won't have time for a supplementary.
First Minister, first question to you as a First Minister, and good luck with your role. Can I ask the First Minister if his junior minister will continue to attend the Specialist Committee on the implementation of the protocol as part of the Joint Committee?
In terms of the DUP's position, we've outlined when it comes to the north-south aspects of these institutions, that is an area now that we will not be providing ministers to partake in. In respect of the specialist committee, I'll need to come back to the member with the specific answers as to what the DUP position is on that one.
And members, and time is up. Could members just bear with us a moment or two? Take your ease for a minute. Thank you.